So in the last lecture, we converted these two members to private members. Now, more accurately, these are not private members of the circle object because technically they are not inside of a circle object. They are local variables that we have defined inside of the circle function. But from an object-oriented point of view, we can refer to them as private members of the circle object. Now, I want to simplify the code here so we can focus on a small issue. I'm going to delete this compute function, right? So we have this private property, default location. We cannot access this from the outside. But what if we want to display that default location somewhere in our application? So we don't want to modify it, we just want to be able to read it. So one solution is to define a method here, this.getDefaultLocation. We set it to a function. And in this function, we simply return default location. Once again, we're dealing with an inner function here. The closure of this function includes all the variables defined here, as well as all the variables defined in its parent functions. So here we have access to default location. And with this, we can call circle.getDefaultLocation. However, I don't like this syntax. I don't like the fact that we're calling this as a method. It would be nicer if we could access this property like this, default location. But we shouldn't be able to set this from the outside. We can only read it. So let me show you how to define a property like that. So this object that you have seen so far has a method called defineProperty. We have another method called defineProperties if you want to define multiple properties in one go. Now, the first argument to this method is the object that we want to add a new property to. That object is the one that is referenced by this, the new circle object, right? So we pass that here. The second argument is the name of our property. We want to call that default location. And the third argument is an object. In this object, we add a key value pair. The key is get. This is a special keyword for JavaScript. And the value is a function. So when we access circle.defaultLocation, this function will be called. Okay? Now here we can simply return default location. Again, this variable is part of the closure of this inner function. So here we can access it, right? Now in VS Code, you don't see that in IntelliSense. So we don't have default location as a property. However, if we save the changes, oops, I made a mistake here. Actually, I should have used defineProperty. So save the changes. All right. So now look at the circle object. Circle. So here's our new property, default location. You can see ... in front of it because this is a computed property. When we click this, that get function will be executed, and here's the result, our default location. Okay. Also, you can see that function is stored here as a getter. So a getter is a function that is used to read a property. So this property we have here, default location, we refer to this as a read-only property. Now, if you want to set the value of this property from the outside, we define a setter. So in this object, we add another key value pair. The key is set, which is a special keyword, and the value is a function. Now this function takes an argument called value. We can set this default location to this value. But what is interesting is that because we are using a function, in this function, we can perform some validation for this value before setting the default location. For example, we can write a simple logic like this. If value.x is falsy or value.y is falsy, we can throw a new error. Again, error is a built-in constructor that we use to create error objects. We pass a string invalid location. So this is the benefit of a setter. Now we can come here and set circle.default location. Let's see what happens if we set this to 1. Save the changes. And here's our error, invalid location. So to recap, use object.define property to define getters and or setters.